Hello and welcome to Long COVID Physio Podcast. My name is Darren Brown. I'm a physiotherapist and I am living with long COVID. And today we have our guest all the way from the United States, Colleen. Colleen, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Colleen O'Connor. I'm a physical therapist of about 5 years, and now I live in Houston, Texas.
Well, welcome to the
3
podcast
months.
today. It's very early in the morning for you, isn't it? And I know you
Yes.
are taking the dog out, it sounds like.
Yeah, he's right here.
Oh, hello. Look at that. Cozy.
Yeah.
What's your dog's name?
Chief.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Sorry. What's your dog's name?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I think we're
Keith.
breaking up a little bit.
Okay. Am I back?
That's better. There we go. We've got you. So, Colleen, I thought because I can't currently get my hair cut or my beard trimmed, I'd try my best to look smart for you today. So I've worn my pelican shirt for you. So I'm trying to look.
I love it.
Yeah. I don't have any pets in my life. I haven't got a beautiful dog sitting on my lap. So I am very envious. All I've got is a print on my shirt.
It works.
But Colleen, I was wondering if you would do us the honor of sharing your story of living with long COVID.
Sure. When COVID kind of first came out, I, like a lot of people, didn't really think it was going to blow up to be what it was. I work in pediatric home health as well as the hospital. So I had, different exposures. I work in inpatient rehab, so there's not supposed to be any COVID on the floor. But there were 2 instances where there was outbreaks and about 4 to 5 patients on the floor did end up having it. I was working in close contact, somehow didn't get it, and I wasn't wearing appropriate PPE. So I thought I was lucky, must have missed me. Then I had another bout where I was feeling sick and I thought I had it, tested negative. Then back in October, I started to feel like allergies and all of that. And I had a wedding to go to. So I made an appointment to get tested just to be sure. My rapid one came back negative. So I thought, okay, good to go. I'm going to go to the wedding. I just probably have a sinus infection. Monday morning, I went, the doctor treated me for a sinus infection. That night I came home from work, my fever spiked. My 2-day test came back positive. So now I, could have exposed all these people at work and the wedding. And I was doing okay the first few days, just tired, a little bit of a headache, some sinus congestion. And then the anxiety kind of set in. My heart rate was kind of going all over the place. I was checking with my pulse ox, like, I don't know, a crazy person. And I noticed that my heart rate kept going down and it was just weird. So that was ER stay number 1. They said it was probably just anxiety, sent me home. 2 days later, woke up with like tremors, wouldn't stop, freezing cold, couldn't catch my breath, went back to the ER. They did more tests. Again, said that everything looked clear, sent me home. I was supposed to go home for Thanksgiving to New York. So they sent me for a Doppler just to see, for flying purposes, because COVID is associated with blood clots. Yeah. They thought they found a blood clot, so they immediately sent me back to the ER. I was there for about 13 hours. They could not confirm that it was a blood clot at all. They did every test under the sun, CT scans, all of that. Cleared me to fly. They ended up saying that it was okay, but the last 3 months have just been kind of up and down with anxiety, insomnia. There were days I didn't sleep for, 3 days. So putting me back on the SSRIs and just kind of been battling with just long COVID symptoms of irregular heart rate, the insomnia, the anxiety, some nasal congestion, fatigue. If I work a day, even if it's a half a day, I come home and pretty much just can't get off the couch for a couple hours. So it's been frustrating for sure.
Yeah. So that there's so much there that sounds really familiar around.
Yes.
Not recognizing what is and what isn't symptoms and challenges with testing and seeking help, but no one really knowing what's going on because it's new and novel and
Sure.
so trying to navigate this and feeling alone quite a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, that feels really familiar with what you've shared there. How long has this been? Sorry, I think I missed that. So how long have you been living with long COVID now?
Just 3 months, but it's been pretty consistent. And I was still testing positive for a while, which I know is common, but that also leads to the isolation because a lot of people are fearful that if you're still testing positive, even though it's assured that you're not contagious, they don't want to be around you. I missed Christmas because I actually had a re-exposure through somebody and I wasn't wearing a mask. And because I was still symptomatic and testing positive, they didn't know if they wanted to qualify it as a reinfection or not, since it was before that 90-day mark. But, my family didn't want me traveling for Christmas if it was a possible reinfection that could be contagious. So there's just been that kind of like uncertainty too of what's really contagious and not.
That's really difficult to manage, isn't it? Because like if we look at kind of the definition or the working definition of long COVID, it's ongoing symptoms after 4 weeks, going up to 12 weeks. So 3 months where you are, and then continuing beyond that. And you're obviously within that time frame, aren't you, where you're still having consistent symptoms? But you mentioned that kind of 90-day thing, which is when you've been tested, they do say there's a window period, don't they, of 90 days where potentially test could become positive again. It doesn't mean that it's reinfected. It's just that your body is demonstrating signs of the infection as such. I'll probably explain that terribly, but but it sounds like that not only caused a lot of uncertainty for you, but also it contributed to that sense of isolation because of needing to isolate.
And out of work again for a certain amount of time. And it's just like several bouts of having to take that time away from work. And because I am PRN, I'm not necessarily compensated for my time. So it's those weeks of just not getting paid and being by myself. And, my family lives back in New York. So I was really like alone that whole time. I do have great friends here that have offered to help and send stuff, but for the most part, my family just, I was calling them at 4 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't fall asleep and just anxious, and them not really, them getting upset because they couldn't be here to help when I was in the ER. So it's just kind of all of that, the isolation, the separation, and that support that I would normally have when I lived back in New York to not really having here. So it was definitely an adjustment.
Yeah, massively, and really challenging. And I suppose you mentioned there as well about the issues that you faced with some of your symptoms. So alongside the anxiety and the other symptoms, you mentioned fatigue, where you'd like, not to put words in your mouth, but crash after work.
Yes.
And struggle with that. And then also around employment, and that must make it so difficult in terms of being able to prioritize you and your health and your recovery when financially you've got to get back to work. So I'd imagine that's caused an awful lot of challenges for you.
I kind of, because when I listened to Ted and him saying that, you just have to take the time. I went to PT school with Ted, so I know him personally. So kind of listen.
World, hey.
So kind of hearing his story, and I'm a workaholic too. I work sometimes 6-7 days a week. So luckily for me, the hospital, even though I was PRN, all of my hospital stays were covered through them. I was put through kind of employee workers comp. They did pay me for the days that I was scheduled to be there that had to cancel. So I was very grateful for that, but it was just my other jobs, unfortunately, aren't like that. So I just bought a house, so I really can't afford to be taking all this time off and all of that. So I just try to schedule my days out a little bit differently now.
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Home. What a huge milestone to achieve. Yes. Congratulations. I know, obviously, so you're based in the United States and I'm based in the United Kingdom. We have different health infrastructures, health systems, and also different policies in terms of employment rights and everything else. And so I don't know that I'm necessarily that familiar with all of the circumstances of what goes on in the States, and I dare say the same vice versa. So it's really interesting to hear that that's a repeated story that we've heard from the physical therapists, physiotherapists from the United States, where I think both yourself, Ted, and also Daria have mentioned the difficulties around remaining in work when needing to manage your symptoms and prioritize your health, which you just really struggle to do, and how much that contributes to the uncertainties and the anxieties that you may be going through.
And a lot of my friends had COVID, a lot of my coworkers had COVID, and they were pretty much back to normal after that 2-week span. They haven't really been complaining about any other symptoms. So for me, it's kind of like I'm the only one out of the group that I know that is still kind of going through all of this. So they can't really relate, and they don't really understand like where the anxiety does come from, and like why I'm still getting symptoms and they're not. And it's just nobody can really explain why some people do get long COVID and some are back to normal and, working out and doing everything that they did before. So that's a little frustrating.
Yeah, like, can you tell us more about how that's made you feel in terms of being in your social circles, the only one really going through this?
I mean, I only have maybe like 2 friends in my social circle that had it. I actually gave it to one of my friends. So we kind of went through it at the same time, but she was, as soon as that 10-day quarantine was lifted, she was back out. Like, even though she had symptoms, she was kind of just doing her normal, whereas I kind of let it kind of take over. And, I was driving my family crazy because they would try to give me advice, but then I would kind of go against it, or I was just, constantly getting better and then regressing and then kind of just going through that. So it was a lot for them to kind of take on as well. So I kind of just felt alone at some point because I didn't want to burden other people with my symptoms. And luckily with social isolation, there's not much going on anyway. So it's not like I'm missing out on that much, but it's definitely a little upsetting and frustrating that other people don't have the same story. I'm glad they don't, but it's definitely a little different for me.
Yeah, there's something almost kind of bittersweet, isn't there, about finding other people with shared experiences, which is, you don't wish it on anybody because it's horrendous, isn't it? But then when you do stumble across those people, you go, oh, thank God for that. I'm not alone. And oh, you feel that too? Amazing. Oh, not amazing. Yeah. You mentioned there around being a really motivated, active, your word, workaholic type of person. And I heard you say there about feeling better and regressing and the ups and downs. So could you share a little bit with that with us?
Yeah, I mean, I wake up pretty much every day tired. I do think it's also from being on the SSRI. So being put back on that with COVID, now it's kind of hard to differentiate. Is it long COVID fatigue? Is it coming from the medicine? Is it from my routine? But I felt that getting back to work and kind of doing my daily routine has helped me because it kind of distracts me from everything. And when I'm working and running around the hospital and working with the kids at home, I feel pretty much okay. And then it's as soon as I get home and then I kind of start to unwind, that I really feel that fatigue and those muscle soreness and everything like that. Besides work, I haven't really gotten back into working out because since my heart rate is fluctuating from the 50s to the 120s, I've just been kind of fearful of kind of what would happen there, and don't want to set myself back to, getting more symptoms or kind of having that flare up again. So I mean, it does help during the day when I do stay busy, but then it's like 4:00 that crash comes and then I don't really feel up to doing much more for the rest of the day.
Yeah. In case anyone listening that doesn't know what an SSRI is, would you share what that is?
Sure. So it's a class of anxiety and depression medication. I was on it for probably 2 years and then I was able to kind of wean myself off. And then once COVID hit, kind of sent me into a spiral. And then I was followed by the workers' comp doctor. She said that people that have never had anxiety before actually get anxiety as a symptom of COVID. So they've been having to treat them with these anxiety medications. It definitely helps. It kind of allows me, I don't go into those massive panic attacks that are really hard to manage. It kind of just subsides that. So it's definitely helped for that. I know a couple people on the group have asked about different ones and if they think it's recommended. I mean, it's definitely helped me. I couldn't manage my anxiety during COVID. And then now I can manage it a little bit, but it obviously comes with side effects. of fatigue, and it causes the drowsiness and, other different things. So it's kind of like what you want to attack with intervening, and what you really want to, if you want those side effects or not. For me, it's definitely helped. But
yeah, because I think that in the context of long COVID, mental health is incredibly important to address, isn't it? Because I know that some of the narratives that maybe have been quite unhelpful is that when people have got symptoms that maybe aren't necessarily objectively identifiable on medical scans or tests, there's a bit of stigma that comes with that, isn't there? And some people can kind of claim it might be in your head, and I think that when living with other mental health conditions on top of having these symptoms, it can be really difficult to navigate that in the healthcare system, I would imagine, because
yes,
you've not only got a condition that is uncertain and unpredictable and people can't really help you with, which creates its own challenges, but we're living in a world that feels like it's falling apart. So
absolutely.
and I would imagine as well, like if we think about management strategies of depression and anxiety, we know that physical activity and exercise is a really good intervention that's evidence-based and successful. But in long COVID, that's a different story. When you're living with what you described as cardiac symptoms and fatigue that is exacerbated by exertion. So under that title of post-exertion malaise, and we know that exercise is not recommended in those areas because it could set you back. So it must be really difficult, I would imagine, to be a physio that normally promotes exercise.
Of course. Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like people don't understand that after COVID, when you have some of these symptoms, it's, kind of impacting everything, your work, your fitness, all of that. And it's kind of, it's hard to kind of explain. Like you said, I would just go out and do a walk, but now a long walk kind of makes me out of breath I live on the third floor now. So going up the stairs, my heart rate gets up to like 120, and then it takes me a couple minutes to just kind of settle back down. So there's a lot of other associated things that come along that people aren't really familiar with, especially with having a mild case. You don't anticipate having these these effects months down the line. I anticipated that it kind of just would level out and I would be back to normal, but that was not the case.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting around, for me personally, the utilization of social media to share voices and stories of what's going on, because we know that the majority of people that contract coronavirus probably have a mild case.
Yes.
And that's a very contested term, isn't it? Where basically you're not hospitalized. And there are so many people that do just recover and don't seem to have any problems. And I'm very envious of those people. But then there's like 10% of us that, as an estimation, that just have these lingering symptoms that just keep hanging about and knocking us about with and making life difficult. And when there's so many people that are not having the same experience as you, it can make it really difficult, can't it? And I wondered if you would share with us maybe some of the uncertainties that you've experienced.
Sure. I guess the frustrating thing is when I start to feel better and then I'm like, okay, I'm kind of over this hump. And then I have that setback. I kind of just get into that mindset. Like, am I ever going to get back to my normal self? Am I ever going to be able to work out? Am I going to be able to, tolerate going out with friends after work? Can I, fill my normal work day? Sometimes I'm working, 10 hours and I start to get that afternoon crash. Am I going to really be able to fulfill everything that I need to do? Am I going to be able to travel safely and see my family? I did just get the vaccine. So kind of, is that really going to protect me and my loved ones until they can get it? So kind of all of that, like really, when am I going to get back to my normal routine and kind of feel like myself again? Is the biggest one for me.
Yeah, and I completely feel that. I know that uncertainty, if we look at kind of research, uncertainty is classified as a domain of disability within something called the episodic disability framework, which actually comes from research in the field of HIV. And we know that when living with a disease that affects you systemically in multiple parts of your body and can be episodic in its nature and ups and downs,
Sure.
the uncertainties about that particular episodic nature are really, really profound. And I know for me, one of those things is my mood spiraled when I was so physically impaired and so disabled with my symptoms. And I was scared. Would I get better? And, I've shared this on the podcast with Ted, but, I had an episode just over a week ago where my brain fog came back at work and I was petrified, and I ugly cried on the phone to my boss because I was so scared of the symptoms not only coming back, but maybe what that means if they're coming back. So this episodic nature and uncertainty creates anxieties that are not, because the anxiety is not driving our symptoms. Anxiety is part of our symptoms.
Exactly.
it's a consequence of the fact that we have so many symptoms.
And I guess listening to some people who obviously, like, I'm only 3 months out, but Ted was, 9-10 months out, and he's still getting the flare-ups. And it's kind of like, well, how long is mine going to last? Like, when more research comes out, is there going to be more like permanent changes that we're going to have to deal with? Is the vaccine going to maybe subdue the long COVID symptoms, or is it really not going to make a difference? So it's kind of like, we're the guinea pigs, and there's not any real information out there for long COVID because it's only been around a year. So kind of waiting for those studies and everything else to come out so we can kind of get a better grasp on what the best interventions are, because doctors don't really understand it either. So they don't have the best advice on really what to do. So that's kind of, we're our own advocates, and we're trying to figure out what's the best home remedies for us, and then giving other people advice. So it's kind of all of that. Who can really help, who understands what's really going to come out in the future to help our whole population of long COVID.
Yeah, completely. And I suppose whilst you were saying that, it was making me think that each of us living with now a potentially chronic health condition, there's a burden with that, isn't there? Of having to self-identify knowledge and skills and seek out that information, because if you don't do it, no one's really giving it to you. Like there's no kind of obvious place to go. And so I know from me, I think I've mentioned this in every podcast, and it's purposeful in mentioning it, how much I've personally learned from other health conditions. So my clinical background is in HIV and cancer, and I have learned so much from people in those areas. And the big things was around episodic disability, also acceptance, and also optimism. But then from another community is MECFS, and the big things I've learned there is about pacing, the presence of post-exertion malaise, which I'll be really honest, I didn't really understand before. And now what rest is, like, wow, how much we're having to learn. But it puts a lot of burden on us, doesn't it, to find that knowledge.
Of course.
So where have you found information that's been useful for you?
I mean, I kind of stopped going down that road because I'm just a very anxious person in general. So then when I'm reading different things and like what you can expect, like I sent myself into a panic attack getting the vaccine, anticipating any potential side effects by reading what those side effects could be. So sometimes I do try to stay away from that research because it kind of gets in my head and you kind of anticipate what you might experience. And then it kind of causes that, am I going to get that? Am I going to feel that type of panic almost? But I mean, the group has definitely helped. You guys have been posting, meaningful articles and stuff. And then I talk to other people at work that, have gone through some of other stuff. And then I just kind of do general research on long COVID or, testing protocols or post-COVID things that are going on. I have a friend that works at the Children's Hospital, and they're seeing an influx of kids that are coming in, with new acquired cardiac conditions after getting
Wow.
COVID and different things like that. So, yeah, I kind of try to stay away from that rabbit hole right now. So I don't anticipate all of that stuff, but
I really feel you. I like, first of all, thank you for referencing that this also affects children, because I know that that sometimes isn't included in the narrative, particularly from the early days. But, you know, we're a year down the line and learning a lot more. But to echo that point, I know, like, when I first had coronavirus, which was in March last year. So I'm now, what am I? 9-10 months, my god.
yeah, around that.
And yeah, I'm really not looking forward to the anniversary. But like, when I crashed in September, like at my 6-month mark, because I didn't recognize that my symptoms were being exacerbated by exertion. I then discovered the word long COVID. I discovered long COVID support groups, and I joined all of them. And over time, I have to remove myself, because exactly like you said, I felt overstimulated by information. And it wasn't that the information was then giving me new symptoms. It was more that I was just worried that I was then going to start to fixate on things, and I didn't need that. And become more anxious than I needed to be. So yeah, completely hear you on that, that there's something so important about peer support and about knowledge and skills and being your own advocate. But there's like a threshold, isn't there? And sometimes you've got to look after yourself and know the limitations of it all.
And I guess from like yours, because like I'm only 3 months in, like how often do you get these like flare-ups and setbacks and all of that, being almost a year out?
Oh my God, you're the first person to ask me a question. Thank you. Do you know what? When I crashed in September, after that point, it took me 4 months to recover. And during that 4-month period, I went from bedbound to working nearly full time again. And that period was full of ups and downs and full of the episodic peaks and troughs of my functioning, because I was learning what my limits were of what would set me back in terms of exertion. But that was also a moving goalpost where as time went on, I was slowly improving, but I didn't know how far I could push. So I kept either holding back too much or pushing too far. When I got excited, I felt better. So it's been completely episodic all along. And now I feel like I've got it now. I feel like I know when I can feel my symptoms coming on. Like if I get brain fog, you got to stop. Got to stop. Can't do it. I know I've really pushed it if I get aches in my thighs. If I get this heavy, hot pain in my thighs, I've really got post-exertion malaise and I need to lay down and lay down hard. But I've not had that for a while. But I think for me, it was learning what it is. And that was, I'll be honest, that was a really uncertain and anxiety-inducing period, because I didn't have a bloody clue what was going on with my body and no one could tell me.
Yeah, I mean, doctors don't really know. When I went to the ER for the blood clot, they did literally everything. So when I left there, I did feel a lot better, because they had ruled out a lot of things that, you know, could have potentially come from that. So it kind of put my mind at ease that, you know, nothing serious was going on, and that, you know, I just kind of had to ride it out. But like you guys and, you know, everybody on the podcasts, I do kind of go. So trying to kind of learn how to slow down. I mean, I do like to lay on the couch and Netflix and all of that stuff, but it's been kind of like having to do that every day. And I was working out, you know, pretty regularly on top of working. And with not working at the beginning of COVID, once I was able to work again, I was, you know, working 6 or 7 days a week. And then I was like, can't go to work, and then going back part-time. So it's, you know, it's been hard for me to kind of say, you do have to take a step back and get the help and then try to transition back in. But I do kind of have difficulty trying to balance pushing myself versus, I don't like to just kind of sit around and wait. So
A couple of
it's
people
kind
have
of been
said
that
that.
mental battle too.
Yeah. It really makes me think of something that I actually now can't remember. That's another issue that I can't remember. But, I can't remember who told me, but it's that push or pace, and that's it for me. I really struggle with learning when it's okay to push a little bit more and to return to my usual levels of functioning, and when I've got a pace. That's been challenging. Colleen, I want to ask you one last question, if that's okay.
Sure.
If there's one thing that you would like to share with people that are listening now, having gone through this journey yourself, what would it be?
I guess that there are other people that are experiencing the same thing and you're not alone, because like I said, I don't know anybody else that has long COVID within my immediate group or my family that's had it. So, there are people out there and there are different interventions. You just kind of have to figure out what works for you. My anxiety's definitely gotten better, but there are those flare-ups and trying to really figure out what the triggers are. But yeah, there are other people out there. It's definitely helped me to know that, obviously, like I said, I don't want people to be going through the same thing, but knowing that there are, it's definitely helped, and getting information from that of better ways to handle it.
Well, that is such a valuable, important message. So I want to say thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for sharing your story. This has been, I find all of these podcasts so therapeutic.
Absolutely.
And I've found this so therapeutic myself because of what you've shared in terms of the physical, the mental, and the social health related challenges, and how they are so intertwined and so important to address. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story
Thank you
today.
for having me.
So I'm going to end the recording now, and I wish you a good day.
Thank you. You too.